is Robin, and welcome to Conversations About a Brighter Way.
And I'm Adam Grant, the Executive Director of A Brighter Way.
And we will be your hosts for this season, which is entitled Welcome Home. We'll be talking with people about their experiences re-entering society post-incarceration. What does that feel like?
Honestly, that first 4 days, it was almost as bad as being in a prison.
What challenges did they face upon release?
Did 30 interviews, and every one of them offered me a job. And every one of them rescinded it once they ran it up the flagpole, despite the fact that I had been honest and forthright.
And what resources they found to help them navigate their path towards a brighter way.
Family and friends, those were the most valuable resources. Knowing that, like he said, I'm not doing this alone.
Tell us a little bit about A Brighter Way.
A little bit is ultimately, a lot of times when I talk about A Brighter Way, it's my understanding of it. So everybody's understanding lends an element to that. When I think of A Brighter Way, I think of a community. And I think of a brighter and better way to do things. And what we do when we speak about things is community building and mentoring. That's our main avenue to a brighter way and to relationships. We provide, I hate to use this word, wraparound services, because some people use it and it doesn't mean squat. But what we mean by it is it's a strength-based, individualized wraparound services. So we find out and we ask questions about what your needs are. And as long as you're willing to engage with us and engage within the process, we work with you on whatever your goals are, whatever your needs are. We can't always make things happen. I wish we could. But I fully believe that a side-by-side model that we can accomplish anything that we need to. So that's what we do, reentry through relationship.
So this is the final episode of Season 1, Welcome Home. I wrote down some reflections about what I've learned and what they have taught me in the last 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's been a little bit longer. I think I came up with the idea in February, gave it to Adam. Adam wasn't too sure. I'm like, let's put it to bed for about 6 weeks. And then I came with a report that he could not say no to.
Yeah, something like that. I remember something like that.
But I remember listening to Ear Hustle and hearing how they shared their humanity, and I wanted to do something like that, and that's where I came up with the format of it. So I want to thank Ear Hustle for the inspiration.
Yeah, and she knew that I was a kindred spirit when I had my Ear Hustle shirt. She was just like, yep, we got to do it.
So Ear Hustle, if you're listening, I would love a shirt. Just saying.
And I would like to be on the show if at all possible.
Please and thank you. So I was thinking back about what Arthur had taught me, and he really helped me remember what it feels like to struggle, because he was struggling those first few days out until he saw you guys, and then you guys welcomed him home. I think that, getting out and then going into a halfway house and feeling almost worse than that, that was a struggle. So that's what I learned from Arthur, is to feel that.
And that it's okay to struggle,
yeah.
And that you get stronger through struggle, and that struggle needs a purpose. And I think, if you remember, Arthur did 44 years. It makes sense that he would struggle when he came home. One of the things that I had a recent realization about that is because I did 27 years, so I know I can relate to a degree, but that's not 44 years. And the other part of the equation that just started to come together for me is he's also 69 years old. When you start to get closer to the end of this thing called life than the birth, things start to weigh a little bit different. So you feel a different kind of urgency. So I think that's a hugely important thing to do too. And like Lawanda, who had a moment where she was reminded that she could be sent back to prison at any time. Arthur had a moment of that too. And imagine that after 44 years, being reminded that you could go back to prison at any moment. So
That's always on the back of your mind. I can only imagine how stressful that would be.
yeah, I will admit that I had less of a version of it this time because so much had changed within me that I knew I wasn't going to be the cause of my going back to prison. That changes the equation because I did go back to prison once. I understand how that feels, but this time was different. But it does make you keenly aware that you're still an inmate. You're just under the least restrictive form of incarceration. By their standards, you are still a ward of the state, and therefore they have the say. So, stress.
Right. And what Q taught me, he actually helped me get in touch with how to define my feelings. He was really good at expressing himself and speaking about what it was like to have that anxiety the day of getting out and going for a walk and noticing things. I thought that was really powerful how he said that. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, like Q needs to hear that he's good at something else. He's always
Q, go.
He's always talking about my big head. So, but no, that's why he's my best friend, is because, we can talk about anything and we don't have to pick and choose. We don't have to put on fronts. And I was there for day one and I saw it and I felt it. And I also felt a responsibility to him. I always think about like Caesar Milan, the little,
the redirection.
Exactly. And I feel that sometimes that's what we need. And so he mentioned that during his interview too, the fact that he just couldn't believe it. Is this real? Is this real? And I'm like, yeah, this is real. And I said, as a matter of fact, let's get out of here. We ain't got to do this here.
Right.
That's one of the things you forget sometimes is now you have options.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that I hope a lot of people learn that from Q, because you'll never find anybody who's ever going to describe Q as a punk, but he expresses himself and he's in touch with his emotions. And I think one of the things that we learn at some point in time is to be a full human being is more important than being some definition of a man that somebody, came up with who was damaged themselves. Being able to express yourself and finding the more words, the more of an emotional vocabulary you have, the more you can deal with those feelings. You don't have to just Hulk smash everything, and so, yeah, I appreciate that about him too. I'll never admit it to his face, but I'll say it here.
Hopefully you're listening, Q. And Patrick taught me, he helped me realize that touch is really important and how much it hurts going without it. He was really, when he talked about touching his girlfriend for the first time and how overwhelming it was. I think you were overwhelmed because she went to the bathroom and then you decided to give some people a lecture.
It wasn't a lecture. It was instruction.
That sounds like a lecture to me. Some random person telling me what to do. It sounds like a lecture.
Oh, I didn't know what else to do, but when Patrick mentioned that too, it kind of ticked some boxes for me too. You have rules about the visiting room and where you can touch, how you can touch, how often you can touch. But it's not only the lack of touch. It's not knowing how you'll respond to it again when it's gone. I was scared when I first came home that I would recoil when my wife would touch me in certain ways because we could lose our visits. We had 11 years of that.
Right.
And so when she, I would worry about that, simple things like sitting there with her hand on my knee or something like that. Or rubbing her shoulder were all illegal. And with the threat of taking the thing that mattered most to you away. So I really related to that too. I want to go with one other thing that I remember from Patrick. And that was some of the little microaggressions that go on in the prisons and the ideas of, it pissed me off. I sat there and thought about it on the whole drive home that day when they had the nerve on Juneteenth to pick the fresh fruit. I'm not even going to say it, but go back and listen to that episode. It's just ridiculous. And stuff like that happens on a regular basis.
So, and Adam, you taught me how to open my eyes to some hard truths about prison and the language that I use. I am naive. I don't think drug use goes on in prison. I don't think anything bad happens in prison. I mean, I do.
Well, I think naive sounds so nice. And I'm going to say the word that sounds less nice.
Ignorant.
And there's nothing wrong with ignorance. It's willful ignorance is the problem, not ignorance. Being able to be open and listen and address your ignorance is courageous. And I think more people need to be able to do that. Not only on the side of the people who are naive and don't know things about prison, but on many of the side of us that are ignorant and naive on the side who have experienced prison and think none of you understand it or that we've got it all figured out. Everybody has things that they're ignorant to. I think it was Socrates that when he was told that he was the wisest man by the oracle or something like that, he said something to the effect of, the only wisdom that I have is knowing that I don't know. And that's acknowledging your ignorance, because then you have a push or a compulsion to learn more. And the more you learn, then you find other places that you're ignorant. So I appreciate your being open to it. And I hope that I don't do it in a way that seems like a lecture.
Not yet.
Okay.
What about Wanda? That's a lesson in there, just that lesson of not knowing how to act, having two sets of standards and then going, wait, everything I've learned, I just unlearn?
Yeah. This is where things get kind of off the rails sometimes too, and where the quote professionals feel like somehow their territory is being taken over by those of us with carceral experience. And that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is at the very least humanize the experience so that if you're saying you put somebody in there that was broken, which I don't believe there are such thing as broken people. Many people will argue with me on that, but listen to my argument. My argument is there are no broken people. There are ill people, and ill people don't need to be fixed. Cars need to be fixed. Toys need to be fixed. People don't need to be fixed. People need to be healed. And time alone does not heal wounds. You have to put something in a splint or a brace, or you have to give it stitches or something like that. The penal system puts you in there. And if you're doing 34 years, they do little to nothing with you for 32 of those years. Now everything's healed up with scars, and scars tighten up over time and restrict movement. That's what she's talking about, is these scars. They've restricted her movement. Then they put her out here and expect her to be limber, agile, and to know all these things.
To be perfect.
Sure. I went through a self-checkout, which was insane to me when I first came out. And I felt like every eye was on me in the place, and I made sure I tallied up every single thing.
You did it twice.
Yeah, I probably did double pay for some things. And one day I bought a pair of boots at Meijer's, and I didn't think about the plastic piece for the security. So I pay for everything, and I walk out the door, and the alarm starts going off.
Oh, I bet you were stressed.
Actually, I wasn't, because I was so convinced that I was doing the right things. The alarm never could have been for me. And then I got home and saw the thing in my boots that I couldn't get out. And instead of, finding a way to snap those things off of there or something like that, I went all the way back to Meijer's to explain what had happened. And because of that idea that I didn't know how this stuff worked.
Right.
You know, there's very simple things that you don't know how it works. And you also get trained in there often not to ask. That's the thing that I think that most people out here don't understand about prison is it's not just about deterring future criminal behavior. There's a deterrent factor for pretty much everything. You get taught not to ask because you're usually not going to get served. You get taught not to seek services because you get put into the category of drug-seeking behavior, or you're just trying to scam the system. And a perfect example of that is that there's a copay for healthcare. I don't know if this is still the case, but I know for years the proceeds that were collected for copays was smaller than the amount that it took to administer the program. So they literally lost money doing the copays on the face, but it saved them tens of millions of dollars on the things that you couldn't see because it deterred people from actually getting the services who needed them. And I used my example, I think, in one of these episodes that we had about my broken wrist. I didn't bother to go. I broke my wrist in 4 places, and I didn't bother to go because I just thought it was a bad sprain, and I thought that they were just going to tell me to put some ice on it, that they won't even give you ice that'll stay for very long because they put pepper in it, because they're afraid that if you get ice without pepper in it, you're actually going to put it in your Kool-Aid or something like that. Like that's the end of the world. I just broke my wrist so I can get some ice. And that is the mentality that goes on in there. So now when she comes out here, LaWanda, she has to worry about how is she going to, put her life together? How is she going to create some kind of life out here? Because she had one in there, and she has to do it without asking. I will say this, that it took a lot of courage for her to come to A Brighter Way, to come to Youth Justice Fund, to come to American Friends Service Committee, and to start activating into all these other areas. She's learned how to ask for help and to be of help. And both of those things are valuable.
Absolutely. Did you learn anything about yourself?
I always learn something about myself, or I learned something more about my experience that I kind of may have suppressed or glossed over. One of the reasons why I do this work is because a lot of people when they come home from prison, all they want to do is get away from it. And I get it. Everybody can't come out here and be an advocate. Everybody can't come out here and be a voice. It can be very traumatizing to relive some of these things. But I did a lot of work before I came home, and I continue to do a lot of work. And this stuff fuels me. It's not that it's not traumatic. It's that there are traumas in your life and you never get rid of them. You mitigate them. So I feel I'm in a better place to process these things. But I do this work because I don't ever want to get that far away from my prison experience. Remember what I said and what you'll hear many people say, and that's those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, and often furthest from the resources. That does not just apply to people who haven't been to prison. That also applies to some people who've been to prison and it's been a while and they haven't dipped their toe back in any of this stuff. And they think they've got it figured out, because there are some people, who play that formerly incarcerated card, and that gives them some gravitas. But then they speak to everybody else like their experiences don't matter and aren't as valuable. And so I am fueled on a regular basis by my community. And as much as it hurts to see, people, it's a double-edged sword. It feels good and it hurts when you watch somebody come home after 44 years. It's good that they're here, but 44 years. You know what they had to endure, and it keeps me grounded. And I've learned more about myself by listening to their experiences. So I look forward to this. We're doing this late. This ends up being a late day. I've still got a big drive ahead of me, but I don't care. I feel rejuvenated, and I enjoy this conversation, these kind of conversations, so much, because this is not work to me. This is
Seems like sharing your purpose.
With me, it is. With me, it is. Pain is unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is a choice. I genuinely believe that. So I've learned that I can endure anything if there's a purpose behind it. Suffering is just suffering if there's nothing else behind it. If I'm doing this for a reason and it's going to result in something and people are going to benefit from it, I can do it. Who would go out and work out in the weight pit if you were just going to say the same amount of strong forever? You know, nobody's going to go through that stuff unless they know that they're getting something out of it. It doesn't mean that you're doing it for selfish reasons, because sometimes you have to do things that fuel you because the world will try and tap you. You have to find things that you're passionate about. I recently saw this, and I can't remember who it came from, but it really, because I really like quotes and I like sayings, but I also think some of them are extremely destructive. And so I love when there's different spins on them. And I recently read, "Do what you love and you never will work a day in your life is nonsense. You'll work twice as hard, but the tools will be lighter in your hands."
Well, I like that. I like the realistic approach to it. Like, it's going to take a lot of work.
Yes, but
I
the
like
tools are lighter in your hands. And I think that's hugely important too, because sometimes if you're like, why am I going to do this? It's just going to be hard work. Well, guess what? The alternative is too. You know, it is. No, it's how you look at it, that whether you realize that or not, but it is. Life is struggle. I mean, look at a seed trying to bust through the soil. And then it's trying to go against gravity to get closer to the sun. It's just what it is. Growth and life is difficult, but it's also rewarding. And when you can have that balance, when you can live in that paradox and realizing it doesn't have to be one thing or the other, when you become an and thinker, not an or thinker, the world opens up to you.
So what do you see? Let me ask myself first.
Oh, good idea.
I know. So what do I see? What would be my vision of this and where it goes, this podcast? I would love to get it into the hands of those incarcerated. And so they can start their journey home. And I think hearing the stories and hearing about the struggle, if they go through it, it might be a little bit easier knowing that Wanda or Arthur, they went through the same thing. And that's why we are going to also include a transcript, because a lot of people don't believe me when I say there's no internet in the prisons.
That's true. That's true. I'll give you how bad they were. When I said that in the previous episode, I think with LaWanda, where I said about the typewriter with no memory.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. I didn't touch a computer until, as a part of my job, I got a job where they had like a Windows 98 computer or something. And this was 2014 or something like that. And I was so computer illiterate that I clicked on one of the icons and it shadowed, but it didn't open. And I just kept doing that. And I was too proud to ask my coworker. It took 5 minutes. And I was like, why is this thing not opening? And he's like, you just double click this. And I didn't even know about double clicking. So yes, when we say there's no internet, there's no internet. Now I hear some of that is going to change, but still there's going to be huge guardrails on what they're going to be able to do with that. It's going to be specific courses that they have. They'll be doing a lot of stuff online that they've been doing in person. I think they're going to pare down their school, you know, things like that, so they can do it. They call them tablets, but they're about the size of our phones.
You know what? Who else I would love to listen to this?
Who?
The families of those incarcerated. So they might know about the journey that they will be a part of. That would be really helpful, I believe.
I think they probably will. I mean, I think it's a natural thing that the way this will be kind of publicized and put out there, that they will be in that loop But it also makes me think that I think that their voice should be heard in this too, not just the voice of people who are incarcerated, but I would like to hear from some of the families of people who've been released, because this is the other thing that we often miss. And I say we with a capital W, meaning everybody, is that they do a bit themselves. Families do a bit themselves, which means they also have a reentry journey themselves in a lot of different ways. And when I say they do a bit, I used to tell everybody in there that your family does a bit. The only difference is that our yard is smaller than their yard, because the fence still keeps them from us, just like it keeps us from them. So when we come home, a lot of our problems and a lot of our stresses become theirs too. You know, I think about Q and his mom. I love their relationship and I love his mom, but I also know that this has been, even though he's doing excellent, he's killing it, but it's still stressful because you can't make up for lost time, and that's your child. And so you not only think about how well they're doing, that your mind can't help but play tricks on you at times, like, but what if this, what if that? And as a mother, that's what you do. You will forever worry, about your child. So maybe at some point in time, that's what we do too, is we find some family members of people who've been incarcerated, who've been successful, those who've been not successful, because that's the other thing too, is they subject themselves to the rules of the system. I know plenty of people who, were law-abiding citizens, never been in trouble a day in their life, get up, go to work, do all that stuff, have a family member come home, and the family member's not doing anything either, and the door gets kicked off the hinges. That's traumatic, and sometimes the family member's whisked away and sent back to prison despite the lack of evidence. You don't need evidence to be violated. Most people don't realize that either. You're a ward of the state, that's kind of deep and it's sad. So when somebody says, I don't care if it's 8 minutes, you were late, that's for real. Okay, I got another question for you.
Okay.
You've been involved with us for a little while now, and I talk often about what my idea of a brighter way is. What has your experience of a brighter way been? I'd like to hear your take on that.
I knew from the start that I wanted to be involved, and you guys have welcomed me with open arms, which I appreciate. It's been, I would say, somewhat tough at times to hear the stories, to hear about the struggle, but it's also uplifting that you are creating a brighter way, is creating a community. And so seeing how you can build a community from all these individuals that have been put through so much is really, it's inspiring to do that, because they don't want to go back. And how do you start your life again without support, without a community? So that has made me realize a lot of things too. Like, I don't know about prison reform. I would absolutely love for it to be reformed. So that is how I've changed. And you've given me self-confidence. I mean, we did this podcast, right? From scratch.
Mm-hmm. I think what you just exhibited, though, is the whole idea of reentry through relationship. We don't know what we don't know. And some things we can't know without the assistance of someone else, or at least proximity, to a problem. I think one of the issues, and I go off on these tangents on occasion, but that's just who I am and how I'm wired. But I think about how some of these conversations and some of the racism that still exists in this country. And one of the reasons why I think that it exists is because we have pockets of this country who has no direct exposure to people of another race. And so they fill in the blanks. And the same thing happens when you're talking about those who are formerly incarcerated. They're people. That's what they are, is they're people who made a mistake. None of us are without mistakes. But people don't have that proximity. I cannot tell you during the course of my incarceration and since I've been home, how many family members and even people who kind of caught one of these humbug cases said, I never even thought about this until I came to prison or until my son came to prison or my husband or my sister. It's proximity. So this idea of reentry through relationship is partially that. It's proximity. This podcast to me is about proximity. This is the ability to get closer, to get into somebody's car ride into work in the morning or in the middle of their workout, or this art installation that we're going to be doing with Reclaim. You know, you never know how you're going to be able to get closer to somebody, and that's the only way you're going to break stigma. You're not going to break stigma. I used to say, I prefer discussions over books or movies or any of those things because I read a book and I have a million questions and can't ask the author. I love conversations because I get that information, and then if I don't fully understand it, I can ask, or I can paraphrase to make sure that I have it. And the next level of that is sometimes I can even add another level, and the author of that conversation comes away with a new understanding of their own words. It's like instant editing. That's, reentry through relationship, is the idea of everything is through relationship. And whether that relationship is an intimate one or one of avoidance, we're always in relationship. So going back to that racism example, the racist part about it is often not even hatred. It shows itself in hatred. What it is they don't even think about the other. My wife told me that one day when I was having a pity party or something for myself. And I was saying something about how people were going to view me when I came home, or how people view us in these situations. And you only have 15-minute phone calls, so you have to be kind of blunt sometimes. And she stopped me dead in my tracks, and she said, it's worse than that. She said, they don't think about you at all.
Wow.
Yeah, and as harsh as that was,
right,
it was the absolute truth, and that is almost worse than having an opinion about me. I did not even deserve an opinion in most people's opinion. Now I inject myself in every chance that I get. That's why I show up. That's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why if somebody wants to do an interview, yes, I'm going to show up in your living room. You're either going to hate me, but you're not going to ignore me.
Damn it.
No, see, it doesn't work. And I think I have a responsibility to do that because of the fact that it's okay. It's not only okay for me, but it fuels me. It fuels my fire. And that takes kind of the pressure off some people who don't have that same relationship with their trauma and their experiences that I do. This is cathartic, for me. That doesn't mean that it doesn't touch on stuff, and it doesn't mean that every once in a while we don't have one of these conversations and I kind of get that weird feeling like, ooh, I hadn't really fully faced that one yet. But I've faced something close to it. I mean, I describe myself as an emotional fireman. Firemen are crazy. When everybody else is running out of a building, they're running into a burning building. When I see something that emotionally makes me want to go the other direction, I run to it because I don't want to be blindsided by it later. That's intense, and it's difficult for some people, especially since I want to talk about that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of times where people are just like, shut up, and I'm like, I can't. I don't know how. I can listen.
You can listen.
So
I will vouch for you. You
right.
can listen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Y'all heard that. There's evidence.
And he can talk.
That is self-evident. My wife said the other day, we were talking about something, and I won't put her on blast exactly what she said, but we talked about whether or not we listen to each other all the time. And she said something to the effect of, that's not fair. You speak a lot more than me. And I had to give her that because there's more for her to miss. I get it. I understand that. I'm very attentive, but there's a lot less to attend to. So I'll give her that.
Good point, Katie.
She is. I told her the only flaw she has is her taste in men.
She's not going to work on that.
No, she's stuck with me now.
Mm-hmm.
I gave her 18 months after I got out to run. She didn't take advantage of it. Now she's stuck.
Anything else?
Not that I can think of. I look forward to whatever conversations come. At this point in time, we don't even know what they are. And we don't have to know what they are. I think that's the point of this.
You mean season 2?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The point of this is not so much what we talk about. It's that we talk about these things. And that's the way that we always want it to be, because we don't ever want to get too much about the message. It's more about the messengers. You know, it's all about personalizing these things. We live life through a narrative, and through sharing our stories, that's how people, you know, begin to care about things that they might not have cared about before. I don't care if you're talking about social issues. I don't care if you're talking about fiscal issues, whatever the case may be. People care about it. Some people care about money more than they care about people. But if you make them understand that money is a product of people, then you can kind of get those things together. You just have to find common ground, or accept the fact that there's going to be some people that you're not going to have common ground with, and it's still okay to have a conversation with them. We don't have to agree. I learn many things from people I completely disagree with. And I find things that I thought I disagreed on and that I don't. And they may continue to completely disagree with me, but I still benefited from it. And if we do it in a format like this, other people benefit from it. Because I think one of the big problems we're having right now is people aren't conversing, and some people are afraid to take part in the conversation because they're afraid they're going to misstep. And I think we should just accept the fact that sometimes we're going to misstep. We're not meant to be perfect. We're human. But we need to have these conversations, and we need to be real, and we need to be honest about it and not attack somebody for their honesty. You can attack them for their stance, but don't attack them for being honest. Praise them for being honest, and then beat them down for being completely wrong. Do it for the right reasons, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I had fun this season. Well, we'll see you in season 2.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to Conversations About a Brighter Way. Welcome home.
We would like to say thank you to the following. This podcast could not have been possible without Grove Studio providing the space. So Grove Studios is in Ypsilanti, Michigan, provides 24/7 self-service, rehearsal, and creative studios for musicians, hip-hop producers, DJs, podcasters, photo, video, and live streaming production. Creatives from around Southeast Michigan have called Grove home since 2018. For more information and booking, check them out online at grovestudios.space. We'd like to thank Patrick Domingo with podcast creation and editing. The beautiful music you hear in the intro and thank yous was written and performed by Chelsea-based singer, songwriter Annie Capps. If you're looking for a rootsy vibe, a touch of twang, and a soulful groove, look no further. You can find her at anniecapps.com. That's ANNIECAPPS.com. We'd like to thank our individual donors. Without them, there could not be a brighter way. Therefore, there could not be a conversation about a brighter way. We're very grateful for their constant support and the way they speak to the stigma that exists in the community on a daily basis. We'd like to thank United Way of Washtenaw County, Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, Nation Outside, and to our volunteers, mentors, and mentees. A Brighter Way is a community, and we could not be a community without all of its participants. So we thank all of you. Thank you very much.
Wait, subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss out on a single episode. And visit the website abrighterway.org for donation opportunities. If you want to reach out to ask questions or send comments, you can email volunteering@abrighterway.org. This is Robin.
And this is Adam.
Peace out.